Mr. Barncastle has asked why we're over-regulating. Well, that's also a difference of opinion. What we're trying to do here as planners, I won't speak for my colleagues, but I think I safely can, is we're trying to look at future impacts and where this is going, and weigh the possibility of future impacts against present benefit. And that's our job as planners. It's not just to say, hey, everything's fine right now, we don't got a problem. It's to look out 20 years and to say, look, if we keep going the way we're going now, might we have some problems? And what are the impacts? And how can we avoid them? So I wouldn't call this over-regulating. I would say this is smart, efficient, prudent look into the future. Mr. Christie has talked about single permitting, and that's something we'll talk about more. So that's my notes on public comment. Finally, I just wanted to frame this discussion because I like to look at things that we all basically agree on, or I believe we agree on. I haven't heard any dissension in this, and Mr. Eisensee's letter from the Ag Commissioner's Department, page 2, spells out a note pretty clearly that AGP 6 provides relatively clear directives through policy statements about what to allow and where to locate visitor serving temporary event uses. And there are kind of 6 bullets, and we want to ensure that these uses and facilities, what we're talking about here in temporary events, maybe if we're considering AGP 6 relevant, 6 bullets. We want to consider and make sure that they're beneficial to the agricultural industry generally, that they're beneficial to farm operators, that they're compatible with long-term agricultural use of the land, that they're clearly incidental to the primary agricultural use of the site, they're clearly secondary to the primary agricultural use of the site, and they're in compliance with appropriate performance standards in the LUO. And again, I want to frame this in something we agree with because I don't hear too much dissension except as to the 2 points of whether AGP 6 is applicable for the secondary and incidental. But I think we all want these things to happen to protect our agricultural lands and the long-term viability. So it's a question of how best we do that we're looking at here. So, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Wyatt. Commissioner Christensen, anything to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few things and with regard to being here. Wish I wasn't, no. Really, truly, that's one of the reasons I asked the staff to clarify at the very beginning of this part of the hearing about whether or not we had to address this issue, because I agree it would be great. I mean, if we were the final word on this, and if a requester or an applicant had to pay for an appeal to the board, I would probably not be willing to hear this today, because I do think that this ultimately is something a board needs to decide, a policy maker needs to decide. But as you heard Mr. Hogue say at the beginning, you know, this actually is our job today, to make an interpretation of current policy and what's going on right now. And I think that we have to do what we're supposed to do. We can't always just pass it on to the board, as much as we'd like to. The board doesn't like that either. They like us to do some work too. And I do believe that not only the public's input this time, but an actual discussion of some of these very difficult issues will be useful to the board when it considers this issue today, these issues today, what's going on currently, and when it goes into its discussion of what's going on with the future ag events ordinance. So for those reasons, you know, I'm willing to do our job today. But believe me, we, as usual, you guys think we want to do this a lot more than we actually want to, at least me. The other thing is I do think you probably have heard that, you know, we have an open disagreement here between 2 major county departments. We've got the Ag Department saying one thing in some areas, and the Planning Department saying another thing in some areas. And, you know, that's real. No one's making that up. They both the staff people have said so in writing, in their reports, and in their presentations today. So when you have that kind of disagreement, you do need something to break that logjam. And I believe that's one of the reasons that the request for interpretation was made. And I think that's a valid reason for us to consider the issues. And I think it also will help applicants and the public as they go forward with current applications, because it's going to be a while before the board does anything about the policies in terms of changing them for the future. I mean, that's going to take a long time, I mean, a relatively long time, a few years maybe, or a year, say, at the least. So in the meantime, we've got all kinds of applications coming in, and what is staff supposed to do? I mean, are they supposed to continually argue and bicker about some of these things? You know, that's not useful for them. It's not useful for us. We don't want to keep being asked about this, and it's certainly not useful for applicants and the public and the neighbors and all of other people. So because I think this is going to be a useful discussion for the board and the public and staff for the next, when it goes to the board automatically, because I think it's going to be useful in terms of trying to calm down this open disagreement, open conflict between two departments, and because I think it will be useful for applicants in between now and whenever something different happens, something specifically obvious, some big policy or ordinance change happens. You know, we not only, you know, have to do it, we should do it, and we are going to do it. One way or the other. But I do not expect, I frankly do not expect this commission to agree on any of these issues brought up, and that disagreement will be, again, that will be a beneficial thing to have in front of the board and in front of staff and in front of the public, because, you know, it'll help open up the discussion, and we're not, since we're not the final people here, that's good, you know, go on to the next folks. So, there you go.
Thank you, Commissioner Christensen. Your comments actually brought up something that I would like to bring to staff's attention. And Mr. Hogue, you've heard us talk about how this is an essential piece of the board's consideration of the proposed changes to the ag tourism amendments. And to that end, I'm hoping that staff, when they're agendizing the board's calendar for the coming months, can agendize it so that the board hears this item first, that they consider our resolution and come to a decision on this item before they go into our request for clarification on the ordinance changes. That's how we would have liked to have heard this, and we couldn't for the reasons discussed this morning. But I'm hoping we can avoid this sort of, you know, back-ending process when it goes to the board. I think that would help them. And Chairman Gibson, if you're listening, take it from us that's a more logical way for the board to proceed in their deliberations on this matter.
Warren Hogue, Department of Planning and Building. We'll certainly convey that. We don't have as much direct control, in fact, no direct control over board agendizing like we do the Planning Commission agenda. We make requests.
Okay.
We will pass that along when we make our request.
Fair enough. Thank you. So during the lunch break, I reread most of the material on this item. As I was driving down from Sacramento last night, I was sort of thinking in my mind how to frame the discussion that we need to have going forward in a way that isn't all over the map.